It's an event steeped in tradition, a stunning display of royal extravaganza. All through the week, watch Gravitas live from London as we get you ground reports and a range of voices, getting you a sense of the fervor on the ground from some of the most iconic places in the City of Dreams, London. Watch Gravitas London edition all through the week with me, Molly Gambhir. Hello and welcome to Gravitas London edition. I am Molly Gambhir and I am coming to you live all the way from West London. We are counting down to the coronation of the king, which is slated for the 6th of May. The grand occasion, it's a coronation which is taking place after 70 years and London is all set for the big day. Although last night there was an incident at the Buckingham Palace, it had to witness a man throwing suspected shotgun cartridges into the palace grounds. The incident unfolded at around 7 p.m. local time here. The man in question has now been arrested and the police saying there is nothing to worry about. The preparations must go on, and so they are. And we have been getting you ground reports on the preparations over the last 2 days as well. Tonight will be more of the same. We are getting you an exclusive conversation with an Indian origin chef who has been invited for the coronation of the king. We'll get you her story. We'll also be showing you how London's tailors are racing against time to design the uniforms of the Royal Guard. That's not all. We're also getting you a sneak peek into the ceremonial robes. We're getting you the story of the robes that King Charles will be wearing for that occasion. We have all that and more lined up for you in this edition. This is Gravitas London edition, and I am Molly Gambhir. Also on the show for you tonight, is China trying to recruit Gorkha soldiers? Reports say Beijing could be reaching out to Kathmandu for its nod to induct Nepalese youths into the People's Liberation Army. Is China trying to strengthen its own military, or is it trying to open a new front with India? Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed the disappointment that he is feeling with the White House and the Pentagon following the leak of confidential papers containing data on Ukraine's spring offensive. On Gravitas tonight, we ask whether all is not well between the US and Ukraine. It's going from bad to worse in Pakistan, with the country reporting record inflation, 36.4%. Pakistan's inflation rate, by the way, has overtaken that of Sri Lanka's. We will tell you all about this. Is China looking to recruit Gorkha soldiers? You know, soldiers from Nepal. Is China looking to recruit them? Make them a part of the PLA or the People's Liberation Army? And is China trying to open a new front with India by doing so? Reports say China is trying to walk down this path. It is exploring options, and that Beijing may reach out to the government of Nepal, the communist government of Nepal, to allow Nepalese youth into the PLA. And if that happens, by the way, China will only be the third country to recruit Gorkha soldiers. Which are the first two, you ask? The United Kingdom and India. In fact, the Gorkhas have been serving in the British Army since 1815. After India's independence, the Indian Army retained 6 regiments of the Gorkha soldiers. And today, there are 7 Gorkha regiments in India with around 40,000 soldiers. And of them, 10,000 soldiers are estimated to be of Nepalese origin. The PLA has been trying to recruit Gorkha soldiers for a while now. After the 1962 war with India, the PLA reached out to Nepal to recruit Gorkha soldiers. Kathmandu refused. But will it agree this time? You should not be surprised if Kathmandu says yes, and I'll tell you why I say that. Number one, because of the existing tensions with the Indian Army. Number two, the unhappiness with the pay being offered by the British Army. And number three, the current political situation in Nepal. Let's just go through these points one by one. We're starting with what's happening in the Indian Army vis-a-vis the Gorkha soldiers. In June 2022, India approved the Agneepath scheme. It changed the recruitment process for the Indian Armed Forces by paving the way for recruiting talent at a young age and retiring 3/4 of the batch every 4 years. But the new scheme has no provision for a pension, and this did not sit well with the youth in Nepal. Why is that? Because so far, the Indian Army was a lucrative career option for the Nepalese youth. The Indian Army paid them 2.5 times of what the Nepalese Army pays. There was pension on top of that, also job security, and the option to settle in India. There are some 126,000 Gorkha pensioners of the Indian Army in Nepal, and they bring to Nepal around $620 million in remuneration, which is 3% of Nepal's GDP and more than Nepal's defense budget. But the Nepalese youth who will be joining the Indian Army now will not have these perks like their Indian counterparts. They too will not be offered a pension. And Nepal is unhappy. Months after the Agneepath scheme was announced, Nepal's then Defense Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Bhim Rawal told the Nepalese Parliament that the scheme violated the tripartite treaty. Which one, you ask? The Memorandum of Agreement on Recruitment of Gorkha Troops. It was signed on the 1st of May 1947 between India and Nepal. Rawal called for the cancellation of the treaty. And the results, by the way, are for everyone to see. This year, not a single Nepalese youth is joining the army. The question is whether China is exploiting this very situation. And before we answer that, let's just go back to point number two. Another reason why Gorkha soldiers may end up in the PLA is because they are unhappy with the British Army. Unlike the Indian Army, the British Army does not treat the Gorkha soldiers as equals. They are discriminated against, paid lesser than their British counterparts. In fact, they also don't receive the same pension as their peers. The Gorkha soldiers in the British Army have been fighting for equality for decades now. From going on hunger strikes outside 10 Downing Street to pleading to the government for better pay, the Gorkhas have done it all. But to what end? You see, the historic problem continues. Meanwhile, the situation back home in Nepal is changing, which brings us to point number three. Today, Nepal is led by a communist government, a communist prime minister, Pushpa Kamal Dahal. In fact, he has opened key trade routes between Nepal and China. Chinese funds are flowing into Nepal. Just a few days ago, the Nepalese government said that China was releasing 80 billion rupees meant for various infra projects in Nepal. So the Nepalese youths are not happy with the Agneepath scheme. There is frustration about what's happening there and what's happening here in the UK, and there is a pro-China government at home. Will China exploit this situation and try to recruit as many Gorkha soldiers as possible? Some of you may be thinking, but why does China want Gorkha soldiers? Aren't there enough PLA troops? Sure, there are. The PLA, in fact, has the world's largest number of active military personnel. But how many of these personnel are combat ready? How many of them have battlefield experience? I don't know if you remember the videos that we showed you some time ago of the PLA troops crying on their way to the LAC, or the line of actual control. My point is, there are serious questions about the PLA's capability. The Gorkha soldiers, on the other hand, had proven their mettle, and they have fought wars for India, be it the 1947 to 48 war, 1965 or 1971. And like we told you, they've also fought for India against China in 1962. In 2020, news broke that China had funded a study to understand what drives the Nepalese youth into joining the Indian army. And we've already answered that for you. China could have asked and saved itself some dollars, could have asked the US and saved some dollars. Jokes aside, recruiting Gorkhas also gives China the chance to intrude into the Nepalese society, become integral to its bread and butter, you see. It also enables China to open a new front with India, decrease Nepal's dependence on India, and one cannot rule out that this could be Beijing trying very hard to burn bridges between India and Nepal at a time when ties between New Delhi and Kathmandu are not at their historic best. It's not as if there is a dearth of tension between India and China. Ladakh remains a stalemate. The border remains tense. And now you have this issue. The talk of China trying to recruit Gorkhas, and this is likely to add to the sense of uneasiness as the Chinese foreign minister visits India to attend the SCO foreign ministers meeting. Russia is accusing Ukraine of attempting to assassinate the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Let me just say that again. Russia is accusing Ukraine of trying to assassinate Vladimir Putin. In fact, Russia is saying that the Kremlin was attacked by drones last night. The Kremlin, remember, is the fortress that houses the official residence of the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. And Russia is saying that 2 drones tried to strike the Kremlin last night. But Moscow managed to shoot down these very drones. This unverified footage is doing the rounds on social media. You can see an object flying over the Kremlin, and then there is an explosion. Those living nearby saying that they saw sparks in the sky and people with flashlights near the Kremlin wall. The Russian statement saying fragments of the drones had fallen on the Kremlin and that there were no casualties or damage. Putin's spokesperson saying that the Russian president was not inside the Kremlin at the time of the attack. But the story, you see, does not end there. The Kremlin released a statement saying that Russia reserves the right to retaliate. Let me just read out that statement for you. Last night, the Kiev regime attempted to carry out a strike on the Kremlin residence of the President of the Russian Federation with unmanned aerial vehicles. We regard these actions as a planned terrorist attack and an attempt on the President's life carried out on the eve of Victory Day, the May 9 parade, at which the presence of foreign guests is also planned, and the Russian side reserved the right to take retaliatory measures where and when it sees fit. Ukraine is saying it has nothing to do with the drone attack meanwhile.
Drones over Kremlin indicate that Russia is preparing certain informational background to justify its own large-scale terrorist acts. So let's see what Russia is going to do. I underline it one more time. Attacking Kremlin with drones is not Ukraine's goal.
The Western media is already pointing at a theory of a false flag operation by Russia, and some even going to the extent of saying that it is astonishing to think that a drone could have come anywhere near the Kremlin. Given how highly protected that area is and the Russian president is. Either way, one thing is clear, that this incident has escalated the already raging conflict. And we will be keeping you updated with the latest that's coming in. Is all not well between Ukraine and the US? I'm asking that because of the latest statement by Volodymyr Zelensky. He is quite disappointed with America's intelligence leaks. In fact, he's come out and openly criticized its ally. He said, and I'm quoting from his statement, "I did not receive information from the White House or the Pentagon beforehand. It is unprofitable for us. It's not beneficial to the reputation of the White House." And that's not even all. According to a Washington Post report, when Zelensky was asked if the leak had strained his trust as far as the US is concerned, he said, and I'm quoting, "I cannot risk our state. Where I can speak frankly, I do it, but there are high risks. If it were my war against Putin and there were two of us on the battlefield, I would tell everyone what I think of them. But here the story is a little different. We are all responsible." Now, this doesn't happen often, does it? While Zelensky indicated that airing his true feelings was not worth the risk, at the same time, he openly expressed his disappointment. And what forced Zelensky to criticize America out loud are the ties between the two countries fraying. The last time we checked, the US and Ukraine were brothers in arms. In fact, Ukraine has been fighting a proxy battle, and the US has been arming it. But things have been different of late. Clearly, there is some friction now, and Ukraine is late for its spring offensive. Why is that? You see, because America has not delivered the promised gifts. For weeks now, top Ukrainian officials, from the president and down onwards, have been cribbing about this. Zelensky has made it clear that he will not send his troops to Russian front lines until he receives more weapons from the West. In fact, the US is well aware of Ukraine's over-dependence on its weapons. And yet, it continues to stall and downgrade its weapons delivery. And why is America doing that? Has it run out of weapons? You see, the US had already refused to send long-range missiles. And again, why is that? Because it only had a few to spare. And to date, America has snubbed Ukrainian requests for F-16 fighter jets. In fact, Zelensky wants tanks, artillery, rocket launchers. But what did he get instead? An embarrassing case of mishandled intelligence. A leak that will go down in history as a huge joke. We have been telling you about this throughout. The classified papers detailed Ukraine's secret spring offensive, according to reports. There were pages after pages, in fact, detailing how Ukraine had planned to win back the lost cities, how NATO would assist it, details of weapon deliveries, troops, battalion strengths. The documents also gave away Kiev's shortfalls, and so much for being tight allies. How did Zelensky learn about the leak? You see, like everybody else in the news. And what was America's response? It claims it had informed its allies about the intel leak. The Pentagon says the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made a lot of phone calls. Apparently, he also held several conversations with his Ukrainian counterpart, Reznikov. Then why is Zelensky telling a completely different story? What really is happening between the two countries? What's going on? The classified documents highlighted America's low confidence in Ukraine. Ukraine is burning American weapons at an irreplaceable pace, and we cannot help but speculate. Was the leak genuinely an accident, or was it an act of sabotage? Is Ukraine's biggest supporter turning its back on it? Zelensky remains desperate for more support. He has made a surprise visit to Finland to attend the Nordic PM summit. And he will be holding bilateral talks with the prime ministers of Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland. What will this spell for the war in Ukraine? Let's now shift focus to Pakistan. The crisis-ridden country is witnessing overwhelming inflation. An inflation rate which has overtaken that of Sri Lanka's. The country which has been seeing one of the worst economic crises. As the Pakistani rupee falls to the lowest levels and the levels of despair and desperation among the people on the ground continue to rise, will Islamabad manage to save itself, with a bailout package. Our next report getting you the complete story.
Political instability, economic crises, and a growing food crisis. The Islamic Republic of Pakistan is suffering. Citizens are considering moving out of the country as the prices for food and basic necessities reach the ceiling. Is Pakistan's game plan failing? Did it even construct a reasonable plan of action? We will come to that. Let's first see the new cause of panic in the nation. Pakistan has topped the list of countries in Asia, the list for countries with the fastest rising inflation. Islamabad's inflation rate has hit an all-time high of 36.4%. It has outpaced the price rise in Sri Lanka, which is at 35.3%. Sri Lanka is actually doing better than Pakistan. We are talking about a nation which saw the worst economic crises. We have been telling you the story of Pakistan for months. The situation seems to be getting worse. The Pakistani rupee is plummeting down the hole. It is now one of the worst performing currencies in the world. The rupee has declined by 20% against the dollar, while politicians look to stabilize a major political crisis. The public is left wondering how to fill their stomachs. Let's show you the numbers which has left people awestruck. The inflation has made basic commodities into luxury. The cost of transport has climbed by 56.8%. The cost of food items have increased by over 48%. Price of clothing and footwear has risen by 21.6%. Water and electricity saw a rise of nearly 17%. The next chapter does not get any better. In Pakistan, essential commodities are mostly imported, but the government is running out of cash. This is fueling the inflation to rise. So what is the solution? Pakistan is looking to the IMF to come to the rescue. It is seeking to secure a $1.1 billion package as part of the total $6.5 billion bailout deal. Both are locked in a debate over an unfinished loan program, which has to be solved before a new package can be secured. At this moment, only war-torn Afghanistan has a weaker economy than Pakistan. This is a new low for the world's fifth most populous country. The question is, where does Pakistan go from here? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is on the cash-strapped Indian airline Go First, earlier known as Go Air. A dispute between the airline and Pratt & Whitney, an engine manufacturer, has led to Go First filing for bankruptcy. In fact, the airline has blamed Pratt & Whitney for its insolvency. How did Go First land up in this mess? Is Go First paying the price for no fault of its own? What's really going on? Our next story telling you more.
Go First Airline, known for its ultra-low-cost flights, has delivered a shock to its investors and flyers. The pocket-friendly airline has filed for insolvency. This announcement is not the only thing worrying the public. Go First has also cancelled all of its flights until May 5th. Although passengers have been promised a refund, employees have been left stranded in several parts of the world. Pilots and cabin crews are stuck in Kuwait, Bangkok, Muscat, Abu Dhabi and Phuket. This is just to name a few. So what led to Go First landing in crisis? The airline blames Pratt & Whitney and says that its geared turbofan engines are the heart of the crisis. In 2016, Go First received its first 320neo aircraft powered by the GTF engines. This is after the airline had ordered 72 narrow-body jets. But the GTF engines turned out to be defective. The engines had problems regarding the fan blades, the oil seal and the combustion chamber lining. By 2017, Go First had to ground or cancel several flights due to engine issues. Pratt & Whitney promised to compensate the airline for the engine failures and replace the engines. But that never happened. In 2022, 50% of the aircraft had faulty engines. The planes had to be grounded. The airline faced massive losses, upwards of $1.3 billion. Now the entire fleet has been grounded because the airline does not have the money to operate or the bandwidth to fly to the committed sectors. On top of that, there's mounting debt. The big question is, will Go First be able to fly again? This airline is not the first to temporarily suspend operations. The ones that previously walked down this path never made it back to the runway. Take for instance the case of Paramount, Kingfisher, more recently Jet Airways or TrueJet or Air Carnival. All the companies tried to infuse funds and sell stakes but could never successfully roll back into business. So will Go First also meet the same fate? The company has already received notices from aircraft lessors. Go First might even face termination of its aircraft lease agreements, which means that soon you could have an airline without aircraft. The timing could not be worse for Go First. Just earlier this weekend, India recorded its highest single-day air passenger count. Today, India's aviation sector is booming. People are travelling more than ever, stamping their passports more than ever, and Go First will not be able to ride this plane. And whom will it blame? Itself or Pratt & Whitney? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Imagine this. You get off an Uber cab, you take a few steps, you check your pockets just to be sure, and panic creeps in. You see, it's that dreadful moment of realization that you have left your phone, your purse, or your wallet behind. Well, you are not alone, especially if you live in Delhi. Uber's lost and found data shows that passengers in Delhi are the most forgetful, and they lose not only phones or wallets, but entire televisions and commodes as well, toilet commodes as well. Our next report telling you more.
This is New Delhi, the capital of India. The city has many star attractions. It's known for its street food, Mughal architecture, thrift markets. It's also a happening place for late-night parties. But now it has another title under its belt. New Delhi is India's most forgetful city. But who decided that? Uber, one of India's biggest cab service providers, the same company that drops home forgetful commuters and party-goers of Delhi. It turns out residents of Delhi forget their belongings in Uber more than those of other metro cities. Delhi has beaten Mumbai to the title. Hyderabad and Bangalore are next on the list. Uber keeps track of things lost by passengers, and its Lost and Found Index has made some bizarre revelations. Let's see. To begin with, more items were forgotten in cabs on Saturday, Sunday and Friday. Yes, the same days when Delhiites party the hardest. They forget their belongings in Uber, mostly during the evening, only to wake up with a sense of panic and maybe a hangover too. So what are the things that people forget the most? Phones, laptop bags and wallets top the list. Then there's clothing, headphones, water bottles, spectacles or sunglasses, keys, jewelry and watches. Samsung, Apple and OnePlus are the top 3 phone brands left behind in Uber cabs. If you took a wild guess, you would have got most of these things right. But let me tell you, these aren't the only belongings people of Delhi have forgotten in Uber cabs. Some forget televisions, curtains, groceries. Others left behind induction stoves, brooms, walking sticks, family collages, and as bizarre as it may sound, even toilet commodes. But what makes the commuters of Delhi so forgetful? Why do they leave their belongings behind? Are they in a rush to escape the heat and pollution? Or are they just too engrossed in talking to fellow passengers? Perhaps they're running late too often and forget stuff in a rush. Or is it the chatty Uber drivers they try to evade?
The coronation of King Charles is also a great gift for London's tailors, especially those based at Savile Row. It is a street in central London's Mayfair. It's famous for its bespoke tailoring for men. And for centuries, the tailors there have been designing suits for over 150 years. In fact, these tailors have been designing suits for kings, queens, politicians and celebrities. And this year they have a special task to design clothes for the coronation ceremony. And tailors at this iconic street are racing against time to design military uniforms for members of the Royal Guard. Here's a detailed report. This is Savile Row, a road best known for turning out sharp suits. In fact, for decades, it has dressed the who's who of the United Kingdom. And this time, the tailors here have a special task: designing clothes for the coronation procession of King Charles. Savile Street in London is famous for turning out sharp suits, and at this point, it's a race against time for the tailors on the street to prepare the red and gold uniforms that will feature in the King's coronation on the 6th of May, adorned with the new insignia of King Charles. In the sales rooms, work is brisk as customers arrive to collect uniforms or suits for those who will be attending as guests. Stepping up preparations for one of the most elaborate ceremonial occasions in Britain.
So at the moment we're changing the tail badges on the uniforms of His Majesty's Bodyguard, the Gentlemen at Arms. We're changing them to the new crown, the Tudor crown. And we have to do this on 29 uniforms. And they will also have the ciphers on their pouches changed.
The big names on the street, Henry Poole, Anderson and Shepherd, they all boast of royal warrants, confirming that they dress the royal family. A mark of authority for many businesses and their clients. In return, they have had to steadily improve their environmental record, supplying energy bills and invoices to show how they have reduced their use of packaging or lighting.
The last time we applied, we had to prove that in the period since we first applied and then the next time, we had reduced our use of packaging, and we had to prove that through invoices. We also had to submit our energy bills, and also that we have, certified that we use LED lighting, and that all our tungsten bulbs have been replaced. So those are just a few things.
The changing of a monarch requires insignia to be replaced, with Charles's Tudor crown, buttons and royal cipher or monogram stitched onto the ceremonial uniforms that will be on display among the 6,000-strong military procession. Savile Row tailors have dressed kings, queens and their children for 150 long years. And King Charles, by the way, happens to be a long-time customer. The sight of soldiers in the elaborate gold braid and red wool of a military uniform are an essential part of British pageantry seen on the streets of the capital last year for both the celebration of the reign of Queen Elizabeth and then her vast funeral procession in September. As for King Charles, he has been photographed wearing the same double-breasted suits that he has owned for decades. He has been an advocate for the slowest fashion approach that has gained greater traction in recent years. This has provided a sort of halo effect for British menswear, with international television crews asking about his approach towards sustainable fashion. This is Molly Gambhir reporting from London for WION The World is One. And since we are discussing wardrobes, how could we not talk about the king? What is he wearing for the grand occasion? Well, the details are out. The king will be wearing golden robes with layers of coronation vestments, the same robe and vestments that were worn by his mother and grandfather. The priceless garments are usually kept with the crown jewels inside the Tower of London. But they are said to be removed from the walled castle. What do they look like? What's their story? Our next report telling you. We know the date, we know the time, and we know the guest list. And now we know about the outfit as well. This is what King Charles III will be wearing for his coronation ceremony. Heavy priest-like golden robes that were worn by his ancestors. The king will put on layer upon layer of glittering coronation vestments inspired by priestly attire. For the crowning, King Charles will be given a long gold-sleeved coat. Now, this robe was created in the year 1911 for George V and has been worn at successive coronations, including by late Queen Elizabeth II. These gold vestments were also worn by the king's mother, Queen Elizabeth II. His grandfather, King George VI, and his great-grandfather, George V. The priceless garments are usually kept with the crown jewels inside the Tower of London, but they will be removed from the walled castle as part of a €150 million security exercise, which has been dubbed Operation Tower of London. And besides this, the king will also be reusing the coronation girdle or the sword belt and the coronation gauntlet or glove, both made for his grandfather, George VI, in 1937.
This glove was made in our Worcester factory, which was the gloving area of the UK. And as you can see, the beautiful gold embroidery. And it's made out of kid. And you can see the lovely crown here. And it was made in 1937 for King George VI.
The glove and its duplicate were made by dents with embroidery by Edward Stilwell and Company. The original glove, the one Charles will wear, has been kept in the royal collection, while the identical duplicate is in Dent's Museum on loan from the Worshipful Company of Glovers.
So it would probably have been a couple, 2-3 days' work at that time. But the big thing would have been choosing the skins and also keeping it all secret. You know, it would have been a specialist team working on it. And I know one of the royal gloves, the manager of the factory actually slept in the factory for a week with the royal glove.
Buckingham Palace is yet to reveal what the monarch will be wearing beneath the vestments, but he will apparently follow in the footsteps of 20th century sovereigns by putting on the super tunica created for George V in 1911, and later the imperial mantle, first worn by George IV in 1821 and then worn at all consecutive coronations since 1911. It is a part of tradition for recent monarchs to reuse garments, just like King Charles is. But in a move aimed at making the event more sustainable, the king has decided to reuse way more than his predecessors. This is Molly Gambhir reporting from London for WION World is One. Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
In Belgrade, Serbian police arrests a 7th grade student after he shot dead 8 fellow students and a security guard and wounded his teacher and 6 other students after he opened fire in his classroom. A Belarusian opposition activist arrested after his Ryanair flight was forced to land in Minsk has been sentenced to 8 years in prison. Roman Protasevich was hauled off his flight and arrested on charges of inciting unrest in May 2021. More than 100 arrested as German and Italian police crack down on Italy's 'Ndrangheta organized crime group. The suspects are accused of smuggling, money laundering, fraud and weapons trade. Myanmar's junta pardons over 2,000 political prisoners to mark a Buddhist holiday, with families rushing to prisons for tearful reunions. U.S. oil prices dropped below $70 a barrel on recession fears. It's the first time the U.S. benchmark oil contract traded under the 70 mark since OPEC Plus cut output a month back. At least 120 killed in flooding and mudslides caused by heavy rains in southern Rwanda, says the Rwandan Red Cross. Roads blocked due to mudslides hamper rescue efforts. Reporters Without Borders says journalists are under unprecedented attacks from governments while releasing its report, where India slips to the 161st rank in terms of press freedom out of 180 countries ranked. Los Angeles Lakers beat the Golden State Warriors 117-112 to win the Western Conference semifinal opener. Eighth-time All-Star Anthony Davis's masterful 30 points, 23 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 block efforts saw the Lakers go one up against the reigning champions. American sprinter and Olympic gold medalist Tori Bowie has died at the age of 32. The former 100-meter world champions management company confirmed the news without giving a reason for her demise. Backstreet Boys are in India for concerts in Mumbai and Delhi. This will be the first appearance by the popular music group in the country after 13 years.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition. We are coming to you from London all through this week in the run-up to the coronation ceremony, which is slated for the 6th of May. We're getting you detailed ground reports from London on aspects of the ceremony, what's going on behind the scenes, and on other developments as well. Stay tuned to WION World is One. You're watching Gravitas London edition. With that, we're saying goodbye. Thanks very much for watching, leaving you with Gravitas images.
Yes, cool.
WION now.
As King Charles III gets officially crowned, WION goes to London to cover the coronation. A week-long coverage from the City of Dreams. A glorious spectacle of pageantry and grandeur. 7 days, 2,000